Namaste, welcome to Satsang this evening here in the UK, and it's good to be back in Satsang, to have you with us, and really for this most important human endeavor that we will ever undertake, this most important, most rewarding, but also perhaps the most challenging thing we'll ever set out to realize. So it's really important to come together in a community like this, not just this community, every community where the truth is the focus of that, and to support and help each other. So it's really nice to be here and do this. So what I wanted to really look at tonight in this time that we've got together is the perhaps one of the fastest and simplest ways to stop the mind. And I'm not talking about some kind of breathing exercise, although there's nothing wrong with those, of course, they're very beneficial, or some kind of spiritual exercise that we can do that actually brings the mind to a halt temporarily, because there are lots of ways to do that, and quite a lot of them are very effective, of course, but the downside to that is mind often starts back up again with even more noise than there was before we even began the exercise. So what I'm talking about here is a full and permanent stopping of the mind, so that from that point forward there is simply a few functional thoughts. Don't forget to turn the oven off, don't forget to lock the door, or you're about to forget your keys, or some, those kind of thoughts that are useful. Turn left here rather than right, it's quicker. All that kind of thing. Those thoughts don't really intrude on our silence. What I'm really talking about is the habitual thoughts of the mind that go around and round and kind of torment us over and over. And is there a way then to bring this kind of thought activity to begin to slow down, to begin to allow it to come to a complete stop? How do we go about doing that? And for me, when I looked at in my own journey when mind was quietest, it was quite surprising when that was. It was quite surprising when that actually occurred. It was almost accidental when the mind first went quiet a few times. Of course, I tried to figure out how that had happened and tried to make it happen again, which made the mind even noisier. It's like it's got scared, it's something inside said, hang on a minute. Because my mind, and I actually believed at one point that I wouldn't exist if I stopped thinking. And that seems weird to me now, but it was very real and felt very true and terrifying. Like, can a human being even exist without thoughts going on? That seemed like a real thing that I needed to look at. So first of all, let's say it's absolutely possible for a human being to exist without thinking. It's possible to go about your life and to be just experiencing. So just listening, just watching, like now, not necessarily having to conceptualize about what's going on in this moment, and how to use what's going on in this moment to our advantage, or how we should have done something differently, or what we could do and didn't do, and all of that. You know how it goes, the mind. It's always talking as if we are this doer of actions. And a lot of the talkingness of the mind is about how to make sure we do the right things to get the results that we want. But of course, if we're not actually a separate being doing these things, if we're not deciding which thoughts are going to come in our mind, if we're not deciding which actions our body is going to do, if we're not deciding what words even we're going to say, they're just arising spontaneously. There's no thinker of thoughts, no doer of action, no planner. Planning happens, no decider. A decision, a thought appears in the mind when it's the right time. A lot of the mind's thinking then is coming from this idea that we've got to get this right. This, whatever this is. So this could be your awakening, it could be your job interview, it could be finding the right person to spend your life with, it could be finding the right place to put your kids in school. On and on and on it goes. All about making decisions and this imaginary doer. And along with that doer, thinking that we're the doer, comes a great responsibility to make sure that we do it right. And of course, if you listen to your mind, pretty much most of the time you don't do it right. And one thing then that we can begin to see, one trick to undercut this thinkingness, is to begin to see that there isn't actually a doer present. There's no separate being who is actually deciding anything. There is only the one supreme self. And in that supreme self, that one being experiencing itself through all of these human bodies, actions are just happening, words are just arising, and our actions, thoughts, experiences just all unfolding spontaneously. Even if the thought arises in your mind, I'm going to do this, this is what I'm going to do. That thought just appeared from nowhere. And nobody made it happen, it just appeared in your mind. So, excuse me. We can begin to get a taste of this if we begin to observe our mind as it's thinking. And it's probably the last thing you want to do right now. Probably the thing that I want to do more than anything is just to get away from the mind. But trying to get away from the mind only makes it noisier. If we can take a really good look at it, why are we so convinced that there's a doer of actions and a decider of decisions and a thinker of thoughts? What is the thinker? Where is it? If you were in charge of the content, if you really had any control over your mind at all directly, like we think we do, we would just simply stop thinking, wouldn't we? If you could do anything to turn your mind off, you would have done it by now. And if you could do make a change to stop yourself saying that wrong thing that you say to that person, you would do that by now. What's actually happening then? Why are we so convinced that there's a doer, that there's a thinker, that there's a decider? Because if we can really get this deep down, then at least 95% of the thoughts that we have each day will disappear. Because if you look at the thoughts, if you think back for a moment now, if you remember now, if you can, the last thing that you were thinking about before you came onto Satsang, whatever that was, what your latest problem is, what you're obsessing over how to fix, and all of what involves this legendary separate self that's deciding what to do. Even if we apply this to awakening, enlightenment itself, there's an idea that I've got to choose the right practices, choose the right teacher, choose the right satsang, choose the right time to practice, choose how I'm doing the practice. All of those things, right, becomes very complicated then. And if I don't get any one of those right, I won't get the desired result. What if something very different is occurring? What if you're just actually here? That's all you're doing. And you're watching thoughts arise in the mind and emotions arise in the body. You're watching your body spontaneously do activities, actions. Spiritual practice is just occurring by itself with no one doing it. Even if the thought arises, I'm going to attend satsang. Did that cause you to actually attend satsang? Or was it just a momentary commentary on what was going to happen anyway? So the thought, the commentary of the mind is just going on alongside reality, which is just happening in the meantime. And I'm not trying to make thoughts useless, because some thoughts are very useful. But I am trying to point to this fact that this imaginary doer and thinker of thoughts, if you had a really negative thought about someone, if you had a really critical, judgmental thought in your mind right now about someone, can you notice the tendency to think I shouldn't have thought that, as if you had any control over it at all? Or if you criticize your own self in your thoughts, judgmental of your own self, is that I'd like to be more loving, I shouldn't think thoughts like that about myself, as if you had any control over that at all. So where does this leave us then? Are we just drifting through life, duty bound to watch whatever thoughts go through the mind, whatever activities and actions go on in the body? Are we just powerless over what's going on in our experience? Do we have any control at all? Do we have any free will? How can we steer and guide our life? What's even the point of coming to satsang if there is no control over what the mind is doing and the body is doing? Well, we don't have this control, this free will as a separate being, because that separate being doesn't exist. I'm not deciding what words come out of my mouth right now. It's just, they're just coming. But as we come to realize that there is no doer of actions, there's no separate being orchestrating my life. There's just life unfolding as me through this body-mind spontaneously. And that unfoldment is always moving towards more of what I do want and less of what I don't want. Naturally, on its own, life wants to experience expansion. Every desire that I think I have as a separate being is really life's desire, expanding. And as I realize that deeper and deeper, what tends to happen then is the quality of my thoughts changes. The quality and the type of actions I have access to then changes. So while I think I'm a separate being, well, I'm really convinced that I'm deciding everything, that I might make some decisions that I regret, might say some things that I seem to regret. All experiential evidence, the illusionary evidence of the separate being that keeps going around and around then. And it really seems that I'm deciding what to say because I said the wrong thing, did the wrong thing. As it really gets clear that there's really nothing, no such entity as a separate being. There's just the one self that's here, and there's a body-mind moving around in it, doing actions and saying things and thinking things. Then the thoughts and actions and words tend to be the ones that we'd want anyway. So indirectly, we have this complete control as the self, as the one being, as the separate self. We think we have control and we absolutely have none. The free will that the separate sense of self is always chasing after and defending doesn't exist anyway in that way. So just taking a moment, let's just experience this right now. And let's just watch and see what the next thought is that pops into our mind. Let's just watch. And whatever that thought is, when it pops in there, notice that you didn't instigate it. It just arrived unbidden and spends as long as it exists for and then disappears. Let's just watch and see. And most of us can't go more than a couple of seconds without mind saying something. And that's normal, of course, at first. Noticing while we were waiting there as well, you didn't have to instruct your lungs to breathe. They were just doing that anyway. Your eyes are blinking by themselves. Your body's repairing itself and digesting food and doing all the things it does all by itself, just like it's thinking by itself spontaneously. All these activities of the body and of the mind are just happening while you watch. Do you really have any control then in the way that we've been led to believe? Is it really your responsibility then to make the mind stop? Ironically, paradoxically, when we deeply realize there is nothing we can do about the mind to make it quiet. Absolutely nothing we can do. We are the space it's appearing in, the body and the mind. When we really surrender into that, there is nothing I can do about anything in my experience, actually. Then everything begins to change into what we would like it to be anyway. It's as if this idea of an imaginary doer has been slowing down, getting in the way of what's trying to unfold, what life wants to do anyway. What I want is what life wants. My life is moving the way that I want it to go anyway. If I can simply come to recognize deeply that I don't have that kind of control. For me, when I first recognized this was really terrifying. I can't stop my mind thinking. I can't let go of any karmic patterns. I can't do anything to reach awakening. I can't do anything to lose the weight that I wanted to lose. I can't do anything about the state of my emotions at that point. And I really let that in there. There's nothing I can do. Why? Because I'm not a someone, I'm not a doer. And all of those things that I want is really what life is already moving me towards. It's already trying to occur and unfold. As I let go of this idea that I'm got to manage that process somehow. What if the only thing in the way of awakening was the someone that was trying to get there? And the last thing that any human being wants to do is to feel helpless or powerless. So we don't want to give up this imagined control that we have. But if you try it just for a moment, there's nothing you can do as a separate being to reach enlightenment. Why? Because you already are where you're trying to get to. There's nobody moving towards it. There's just it. And your body and mind appearing inside it. So I'd urge you just to try to take that a little bit deeper into your heart. There's nothing you can do as a separate being. But the other side of that is there's nothing you need to do, actually. You can't even take any action to undo this imaginary being because it doesn't exist. This imaginary separate sense of someone. Can we be really radically honest in this moment, admit that everything I think I'm doing as a separate being, I'm not? Life is doing it through my body and mind, actually. The one being is doing it, life, synonyms. This moved from being intensely frustrating and terrifying to be actually quite freeing. When I took it deeper, if I'm not doing anything in the way that I think, or I have to be honest that I'm doing all of this, the whole universe, I have to be honest about that. Not just taking responsibility for one body, mind's actions, but recognizing I'm doing all of this. I'm doing none of it, or I'm doing all of it, whichever one feels most right for you. Then there's this deep relaxation because I can't screw it up. I also can't resist awakening. Resistance comes from this imaginary being. It also means that it's already unfolding. The progress that I think I've made as a separate being was what was going to happen anyway, and probably a lot faster without this idea of a someone getting it right or getting it wrong most times. What does that mean? It means you're not responsible for the outcome of any actions. You're just watching their actions happen spontaneously. If I put my hand in the air, I don't have to think about it first, do I? Mind might jump in alongside and say, you're going to put your hand in the air. Or if something falls off the countertop and you reach out quickly out of reflex to grab it before it hits the floor. Mind will say, a fraction of a second later, I did that. I did that. I caught it. Aren't I clever? But then the other side of that coin is, if you don't catch it in time and it drops on the floor and smashes, mind will say, I didn't get that in time. I'm not good enough. I should have done better. And it's just this commentary that's going on about absolutely nothing. This talking in a head in the middle of the great being. And the mind really thinks that this talkingness is actually having some impact on what's actually unfolding. I remember watching one night when I was a child, a show about on TV about one of the general elections that we had here when I can't remember how old. And my mom and dad were watching, as the results come in. And there were all these people talking about which way it was going to go. Was it going to go this way, this way? And they were analyzing this and they were looking at that and they were saying, if this carries on this way, it's going to go this way. And then if it goes this way, it's going to go, this particular result. And I remember just listening to this and thinking, they don't know actually who's going to win this election still. Even like half an hour before the final results came in, they still didn't know. And I remember asking my dad, who's going to win it then? And he said, I don't know. And ever since then, when I hear the mind talking, it doesn't do it these days. But when it used to do its thing, it was like this commentator or on a football match. You watch a football match and the commentator is just going on, or any sports event, just going on and on and on about what's already unfolding. And they get paid to do that. So there's this commentary going on that thinks the commentator is just a thought. The thinker of thoughts is also a thought. I decided that. I made that action happen, says a thought. I should have done that, but I didn't, says a thought. I should not have said that, says a thought. I reached awakening, says a thought. I did not reach awakening. I've screwed it up again, says another thought. All just floating around in the emptiness of being. And this thought stream is totally convinced that it's making a difference as to what's actually occurring. But what if it's not? I'm not saying this so that you push your mind away, but just so that you don't quite take it so seriously. Maybe a little bit lighter. Maybe it could be one of those sports commentators that just talks endlessly about nothing and the same thing over and over again. And once you realize that your mind isn't actually dictating reality with what it's saying, it's kind of impossible to take it as seriously. And that also means to push against it so hard. It becomes like a little cute pet. It becomes like a little 2 or 3 year old toddler that has a little tantrum every now and again, but mostly is placatable. You go think some nice thoughts about awakening, and you sit down and we'll have a chat about awakening or something. So what if there's never been a doer? What if there's just thoughts? What if the whole separate self is a bunch of thoughts? The person that we've taken ourselves to be is just a thought collection, a library of thoughts. Is that terrifying, or is it freeing, or both? Maybe a little of both. What does that mean then? It means there's nothing to undo. Nothing to put back right that this separate being has messed up. Also means there's no karmic patterns, really, because they also belong to a thought. This separate me that really longs for awakening but can't seem to get there is just a thought. But it seems to have a reality and a continuity and a duration and a progress because it's one thought after another. Just spending a moment now, just seeing. Let's just spend another couple of minutes observing what happens. If we really, 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 really try not to think and see that it happens anyway, you'll see that you've got no control in the way that you think. But if you've got no control in that way, you can relax. It's not your job to sort that out. It's only your job to recognize where you're already looking from then. And the mind goes quiet by itself. There's no imaginary doer of actions. And there is no imaginary seeker of enlightenment. There's just enlightenment, actually, already here, everywhere. No one to reach it, merge in it, dissolve in it, become it, embody it. Let's just spend 5 or 10 minutes before we go into the questions. Just watching our body and mind, just watching. Watching the presence or absence of thoughts, emotions, sensations. Just seeing that they're coming and going by themselves. Whatever's unfolding, your lungs are breathing, your mind is thinking, sensations are happening, sense perceptions going on. It's just all happening by itself. And we're simply just watching. Noticing how it feels when you don't have to sort anything out, when you're not responsible for anything. Not in the way that we thought. Don't even have to make anything happen, just simply watching. No thinker, just thoughts. Karmic patterns that don't belong to anybody, just floating around in the emptiness. Emotions arising and falling away, all by themselves. And we're just watching. As if all we can do is watch. It makes no difference to us as the watcher, whether thoughts are happening or not. Sometimes we watch thoughts. Sometimes we watch nothing. There's no manager of my life. There's just life. Life coming to recognize itself. Just watching. Whatever's occurring. We're just watching. With no need to try to control anything. Just noticing how it feels in your body to not have to manage anything. To not have to manage this most important awakening even. Just watch. Watching thoughts come, and then watching thoughts go. Just the thoughts and the watching with no thinker. You're just here. Thoughts are happening inside you. Actions are happening inside you. Emotions coming and going inside you. Phenomena moving and changing while you watch. So as we move into the next section with the questions and answers, let's see if we can remain simply in this watching mode. And if a question is asked and an answer is given, those are just happening. There's no questioner. And there's no one answering. There's just spontaneous action. There is nobody conducting this orchestra of life. There's just this symphony happening. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read a question that's been sent in. See, we have a hand up as well. I'll come to you in a minute, Frank. This question says, hi, Helen, just want to firstly convey my deepest gratitude for your guidance. I connected with you when my father committed suicide, and your guidance expanded my consciousness. My older brother is currently in and out of psychiatric wards and is also suicidal. I'm the only sibling available for him. He's suffering immensely, and it's crippling for the child in me, desperate to help the child in him. It's expanding my consciousness further, as life is perfectly designed. I'm fully committed to perceiving him as only boundless freedom and peace, however that appears. I'd love your guidance to expand even deeper into my or the self. Lots of love. Thank you so much. So, not an easy thing to guide someone through who is suicidal. I have been there myself and also had to guide someone through that. So it's not an easy thing to do, is it? And of course, you want to make sure that you can help in the best way that you can. And it's also good, as you're saying here, that you realize that this is also helping you in your awakening to let go even deeper into what you already are. So what really wants to come about this? It's crippling for the child in me, desperate to help the child in him. Well, I would just ask you to look at that and maybe be willing to ponder if this this feeling of a child inside that needs to help, and of course you do, because it's, you know, it's your older brother, but the agony is coming from this idea that you're not helping in the best way, or that there could be some other way that you could help that's better than what you're already doing, or what you're already being in terms of your awakening. So that would be the thing that I would look at. And I know we spoke about this as well when your father was right after your father had taken his life. So it's a similar thing here in terms of this idea that you should or could do something differently than you are, that there's some magic way, some special way, some way that's going to really make a difference for you to be, or something for you to do, or some way that you can help your brother that's going to be the magic way, you know, the one that really helps him come out of it successfully. And also, you know, stops the worst case scenario, so to speak, from happening. But if we look at that assumption, is that really not going to necessarily be true? Is there a perfect way to be in this? Is there a magic way that's going to fix everything? Or is what you're already doing, being, showing up for him enough? Can anyone ask more of that, but more of you than that? I don't think so. Because the things that are going to come from your mouth and your actions are going to be in line with who you're seeing yourself to be anyway, the real self. It's beyond any limitations and is beyond birth, life, and death. And I'm not suggesting, of course, that you say that to your brother. He's probably not ready to hear that, and that's okay. That's where he's at. But as you remember that inside, also that you're spontaneously watching the body move and do whatever it does to help, that will be the highest help that's possible to give anyway in this moment for him already. Highest thing that can show up for us in any moment is what we're experiencing. As we let go of thoughts, believing so many thoughts, then what's possible for us to experience is going to increase, improve. So the crippling is the thing I'd really like you to look at, because it's based on this idea that there's something else that you can do, or some magic words that I can say that's going to make you have an epiphany, and then you're going to be able to look after him even better. Maybe you're already giving everything you need to. I'm sure that you are. You're showing up for him. And for many people in that dark place, a lot of people don't want to be around them because it reminds them of their own mortality. So for you to actually, or your own dark place that we've all been, I'm sure, inside. So for you to show up for him, even though it might not feel comfortable all the time, it is the best gift you could give him anyway. Just to literally be there. I know that sounds like a cliche, but it's nonetheless true. You showed up, and that's the biggest thing. He knows that he's loved, even if you can't accept that right now. you're giving him that evidence. So I don't really have anything magic to say other than that just to question this idea that there's something else you could be doing or should be doing based on this, again, this imaginary doer of actions, you know. And if there's not the separate being, if that doesn't exist, then what's happening between your body and his body is already the highest thing. You're on track for the best outcome that could happen from this, as you don't believe thoughts around it. And there's nothing simpler and more effective than that. Let's not ever forget also the power, the presence that you're radiating non-verbally to him, making it just that little bit harder for him to go quite so low. You're helping in lots of ways already. So I hope that does give you something to work with there. Maybe just considering that you're already doing the best that you can, because that's what's actually unfolding anyway. That is the truth. So thank you for that. And I'm of course wishing for the best outcome for your brother, and that he comes out of this and back into joy. Being through that myself, as I'm sure a lot of us have in satsang, and it feels impossible to come out of at that point, doesn't it? But nonetheless, eventually, slowly but surely, we climb back out of that. So, thank you. So we'll go to Frank whenever you're ready. There we go.
Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Thank you for that answer, and that person who asked the question, that helped me a lot too, because I'm going through a sort of a similar thing with my mom, but it's not physically, it's not a mental illness. Well, it is, it's a mental illness. She has dementia.
Mm-hmm.
Very difficult for me to deal with, because I'm seeing the decline, and
Yeah.
she's aware of the decline, which is very clear to me that we have awareness, and then there's awareness of whatever's going on with our minds. So she has that awareness. It's frustrating for me to think that, you know, just to think that something in me tells me that this can be healed, because of this awareness I have about awareness, that we all have this awareness that we are awareness. But I'm still seeing that decline, and I'm seeing her. She gets depressed over watching her own decline.
Yeah.
Wondering if you could talk about dementia in general, or anything about non-duality and what we study here with you, and how that can help the situation.
For me, it's quite a difficult thing to watch, isn't it? Sometimes it's even easier when that person has no awareness of what's going on around them. It's only when they seem to come back, that separate sense of self seems to come back, and they realize they realize they've been absent for a while, so to speak. That's when the difficult is actually quite peaceful sometimes, when they're just not here in that same personal way. And for me, watching one of my relatives go through that, it struck me, and this may sound like a very strange thing to say, and it might be very controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway because it helped me, that I was actually suffering with that process more than they were. You know, it seemed like I was having a harder time of it, because I was watching for large parts of the time that this person was quite peaceful. It was only these sporadic moments where they realized what they were forgetting about themselves that was actually distressing for that being at that time. And it was about the time I was starting to really deepen in my own awakening. And it seemed quite paradoxical that here was a being who's involuntarily forgetting about themselves and being distressed by it. And I was actually actively trying to forget about myself as a separate being, and being distressed because I couldn't do that, or seemingly effectively. And it struck me that the thing that was really bothering both of us was the lack of control, the seeming lack of control, rather than the actual process itself. So one being thinks that they're forgetting and they don't have control over stopping that. And I'm sat there going, I'd like to forget myself more as a separate being, and I don't have control over that. I'm trying to make it happen and it's not working. And something seemed to shift when I realized that it's really more about control, this imagined separate self. And that the terrifying thing about losing that sense of self, if we don't want to, is that we think that that's all that we are. So it's distressing for that person because they think they're losing themselves. And of course, that's how it seems. And I wouldn't for a second try to suggest that you explain that to them, but you can know inside your own self that all they're losing is thoughts, that the identity that they're actually losing is a thought constructed self made of thoughts and memories and desires and things like that. Not actually the essence of who they are is untouched by the whole process. So it can look very distressing watching this occur, but it can actually be quite a gradual way for the self to withdraw from the body when it's time for that to occur. Very slow and gradual way for that to occur. I'm not saying that's going to happen anytime soon. I don't mean that, but it's not necessarily only a bad thing. It's a bad thing if I think I'm a separate being and I'm losing that. Can you get a sense of it?
Yes.
If you can remember that the essence of that being is untouched completely by this process, and that being is not actually suffering, although everyone else would say that they are. Thoughts are suffering. Who they really are is not touched by that. As you can feel that within yourself, there's some part of you that can handle this no matter how bad it gets. It's some part of you that's not moved compassionately, but not moved into suffering, you know. Can you get a sense of it?
I do have a sense of that. Yeah. I have some questions around, like memories. I don't understand how memory, like she has short-term memory loss, but she can remember things from 20, 30 years ago, which is because they're all memories. And she has the awareness that she can remember things from 20 years ago, but not 2 minutes ago. I don't see how having that awareness can't bring those memories, like all the memories back. But that's probably my mind trying to figure it all out. But it's
And
very
that's
baffling.
assuming that the self appearing as her wants to bring them back. The mind wants to, because the mind feels it's losing itself.
Yeah.
But what if you had this beautiful apparatus of a mind and a body that you lived in for a while? And then on some level, when it's time to start dismantling that, it begins to gently do that, little pieces at a time, in a gradual way that person, everyone around can begin to adjust to, slowly, and increasing sort of speed as it goes. But the mind says that's a terrible thing because it thinks it's losing itself. It thinks it is that thought constructed self, and that's all that we are. So it really wants to try to hold on to that and maintain that, and it fights the process that's going on as it's going on. Can you see what I mean?
Yes, I do see that. Yeah.
Everything that we've forgotten about ourselves consciously, we're choosing to do that. It's left us lighter and freer. And in some way, that's also happening with someone who's not voluntarily in the satsang yet. It's also happening in that way. But like, for example, if you could imagine right now, if you suddenly forgot all of your language, all the words you've ever learned, if you couldn't name anything, there'd be a lot more peace in your life immediately, because there'd be, along with all the names would go all the good and bad and wanted and not wanted. There'd be no difference between fear and bliss, and you won't be pushing against one and trying to hold on to the other and all of that. So there's a process occurring, and everybody's body has to come to an end at some point. And sometimes this is a way that the self can withdraw gradually from the body. So looking at it as a separate being is a terrible, horrible end process that the person seems very much out of control of. But from a bigger picture, maybe it's a different thing. Then there's enough left of that separate sense of self sometimes to realize which parts of it have fallen away, but not to have any control over that, because it thinks it has control over that. That's the thing that's distressing, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Loss of control and autonomy. That seems to be a big thing with my mom, just feeling like she's not autonomous anymore and has other people. And that's very painful for her.
And we all have to face that. I mean, it's what we've been looking at in Satsang tonight, right? This particular idea that we're in control of our lives in the way that the separate being thinks it is. We all have to face that either involuntarily or voluntarily. And that is the core illusion right there, isn't it? That I'm here in control of my life and even in control of my own death process eventually. Something like that. And then that illusion is just shown to be, this is not actually true. So that's what's ultimately distressing. Even more so than the idea that I'm forgetting myself. And I want to remember is the idea that I don't have any control over that. As you remember inside your own self what's actually true, then you're doing the best thing that you can to help her. Don't ever underestimate that. This work that you're doing here is helping her as well.
Yes. I did keep telling her she's not losing herself. It may seem that way, but she's not losing herself, her core self. It does seem to help.
Good. And you know, just your presence, even non-verbally, that your calmness, your peace means she'll find it, she won't be able to be as scared. She might still get scared, but not to the extent that she, you know, your presence offsets some of that for her. So that cannot be underestimated, the value of that.
Great. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you. Okay. Lena?
Hello, dear Helen.
Hi.
Such a beautiful topic today. I enjoyed so much. I'm usually, thank you so much for this. Usually I'm a great asker, and this time questioner. And this time I even didn't want to ask anything. It was so peaceful and beautiful. Thank you. But two questions got me into the question, and I will be very short. What do you think about this? It's Socrates said, there is no illness from the body apart from the mind.
Any illness or disease or anything that we're maybe diagnosed with has a deeper cause, a deeper root than just a physical. It's never just a physical thing. It starts from a kind of imbalance in our thoughts, an energetic illness first, and then reflects, if it's chronic enough, then it reflects as a physical illness or a financial illness or a relationship illness. There'll be some dis-ease, lack of flow in some area of our life, the lack of ease and flow. So it's always coming from, there's never anything that just happens to a body. It's always come from an energetic source first. Most of us aren't aware of that, or we might feel it as a negative emotion, but we might be very good at suppressing that or avoiding it, you know, as we've learned to do as seemingly separate beings. So when it's loud enough, that energetic imbalance, then the body tells us, hey, something's really wrong here. You need to look at this. You need to address this. And that's, in fact, you know, where we have a body and a mind and relationships, so we can see where those imbalances are that we've brought in from this the previous incarnation where we left off.
Wow, thank you so much.
Is that helpful? Yeah.
Yes, very much.
Thank you. Lovely. But anyone else like to ask a question? We've got time for one more, or I can read one more that's been sent in. Some deep topics. Okay, Shankara. Yeah.
Hello, Helen. Can you
Hi.
hear me?
I can, yeah.
Okay. What is this mechanism, or what is this belief that this I thinks is the doer or the thinker? What is that? Why? Why?
Why do you think it's here? Why do you think it arises, this sense?
I'm not sure, actually.
This body arises, this body forms, and then sense perception starts happening, and actions start happening in the body, and words, eventually language comes, and a more and more complex thought process. And the self that's appearing as this body mind, the infinite self, is fascinated with objects. It loves phenomena. It's just obsessed with watching phenomena. And it starts to try to figure out which one of those phenomena it is. And it looks at the particular body it seems to be looking through and says, this is me, this is me. And when it says, this is me, I am this body, this mind, then it kind of, a byproduct of that is it seems to take responsibility for everything that's happening in the body and mind. If this is me, then I must be the thinker too. If this is me, then I must be the doer of actions too. It's kind of an automatic add-on. Once I decide that this is me, then everything that's happening here is me too. The thoughts are mine, they belong to me. Suddenly this idea of me and mine, this is me, and then I have me and mine, my thoughts, my karmic patterns, my emotions, my actions, my relationships, all of that comes in. Can you see that? That once you say that that body is you, everything that's going on in there is you also, isn't it? All of it, the thoughts and everything. Over time, this illusion gets so solidified because it keeps experiencing that. It thinks it's deciding through, and it thinks it's the thinker, that there's a thinker of thoughts. And that keeps getting reinforced back in its experience over and over again. The illusion gets more and more believed deeply. So then it thinks about how to get out of this trap, which only solidifies the idea even more that there's someone here thinking. It goes around like that for a very long time, doesn't it? Who knows how long, until it eventually comes to see, actually, there isn't a thinker. There's just thoughts going on. For a long time, the infinite self is fascinated with objects, usually thoughts. Sometimes so much so we caught up in our heads, we don't even notice what objects are going out here, really. They're just passing, our lives passing us by. And then he starts to sort of think about, is there actually a thinker? And realizes there isn't a thinker. Then it all starts to fall apart much quicker.
The thoughts, they seem so alive. They seem so like an entity, kind of, like this feeling of I, or I am this, I am that, I'm thinking this, I'm doing that. Even this, now I'm talking.
I'm talking. I'm talking, and then I'm listening, and I'm deciding what to say, and it's such as the power of habit, isn't it? And belief. You're infinitely powerful. You're the infinite power. And if you play with this idea that I'm deciding, it really feels very true, doesn't it? In that moment, really. But it's just a habit nonetheless. Because if you say to me right now, for the rest of my life, I'm never going to speak another word. You might manage that for a certain amount of time, but at some point you're going to say something. Or I'm not going to blink my eyes. How long can you know, I'm not going to use the bathroom for the rest of forever. You just have absolutely no control over that, right? It's just going to happen, whether you want it to or not. You can't stop blinking. You can't stop breathing. I used to try to do that as a child, right? I'm going to hold my breath, and I used to get really frustrated when I couldn't stop it. It just eventually you start breathing again, and that's a good thing, obviously. But it's just such a anything that you play with, any idea that you play with and believe, you experience it as extraordinarily real. That's why the illusion is so pervasive and convincing. The moment you believe you're someone, everything in the universe corresponds to that idea, right? To reinforce that idea.
Why did this occur? Why did it show up like this belief of being some separate being, or why has, do you know why it has been created, or what's the purpose? What's the purpose of believing to be a separate being, and then to find out that there's no separate being, there's only this one? What do you see your opinion about
I don't think there is a purpose.
There's no purpose.
No purpose. You could say maybe in each form it appears, when it appears as a single-celled amoeba, it can have a very rudimentary experience. And then it shows up as a plant. It can have a slightly more complex experience of itself. What's it like to be a plant? And then it's a turtle, and then it's a cat, and then it's a chimpanzee, and then it's a human being. And then whatever comes after human beings, whatever other, so as the forms evolve, it can have a more complex, deeper understanding of itself. In a human brain, in a human being, it can come to realize where it came from. It can realize what it really is, that it's not that form, that it is, the source. And that's the upside. The downside of that is, as it wants to question what it really is, the first answer it comes up with is this is what I really am. And it sticks there for a very long time. And it sorts everything in reality into me and not me. This is me and that's not me. Not me, not me, not me, not me. Me. My thoughts, me. So in the ability to have this deeper experience of itself, it also has this ability to get fixated on trying to define itself, understand itself. And it makes the erroneous assumption that I am this body and mind, and then gets stuck there for quite some time. Many body and minds come and go while that idea is still.
Okay. So there's
no reason behind it. If there is a reason, you could say, well, it's just because it wants to experience itself through it's playing with the shapes, it's playing with the forms. Even that's not really true.
No,
Evolution.
because it's not doing anything. It's not doing anything.
Yeah.
It's just here and observes, right?
Yeah. And the forms are just evolving, driven by this desire that life has to experience itself even more intimately. And that's the only reason we're showing up as human beings rather than a single-celled amoeba, because we can have a more intimate understanding of ourselves through a conversation like this than two amoebas can. But there's no purpose behind that. There's no why in the way that the mind would like. Or you could say it's why not? Why not? Let's experience ourselves every way we can, every form.
And then one question arises, what is that about the spiritual practice then? I mean, there's there are masters, they say, you need to practice. And from my experience, practice is not needed, but still we are practicing, or I'm practicing. And it feels like sometimes very good, but you are right. We never reach the point of kind of enlightenment in the practice. But why does this?
The practicer, the doer of spiritual practice dissolves, isn't it?
Huh?
The doer of spiritual practice dissolves and leaves only the self. The idea that there's someone practicing. If there is a purpose for spiritual practice, it's that, isn't it? That I come to see that it's just going on by itself. Meditation is just happening.
Yes.
Self-inquiry is just happening. It's not driven by some entity that's trying to reach something. And gradually, bit by bit, the one that's trying to get there disappears. Because it's only thoughts anyway, right? It's only thoughts. Technically, no practice is needed because you're already that. But ironically, it's quite difficult to see that without practice, without thinning out the sense of a doer. That's what the practice does. It thins out this sense of I'm a someone. It just gets more and more vague and lighter and easier to see through.
So that one which thinks it's practicing just gradually dissolves by practicing.
Yeah.
Just the practicing is to dissolve the practitioner.
Yeah. Just that, right?
Just that.
I think Ramana said inquiry goes on until the inquirer has disappeared. I'm paraphrasing, but that's when it stops. So it's an undoing really more than a doing, isn't it, in that way?
Yes.
If you spend enough time actually looking at reality, you lose your passion for imagining what's not true,
Yeah.
because you can't do both at the same time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. Okay. So we'll leave it there for tonight and Satsang. Thank you for your the questions that you sent in and for the questions you've asked here tonight. Some difficult and challenging subjects, but nonetheless good to talk about. So thank you for putting your own awakening first above everything else you could be doing with this time. Namaste.
Yeah.